In the early summer of 1965, Bob Dylan introduced the world to his electric music for the first time at the Newport Folk Festival. In this obscenely dramatic event, Dylan gets up on stage with members of the Paul Butterfield Blues Band and plays his new songs with his guitar plugged into an amplifier and a booming rhythm section set up behind him. The crowd of folkies who were expecting Blowing in the Wind booed him off stage, and his peers in the background were in just as much of a panic.
He's not the same as what he was at first.
This is the story of what happened next after the Newport Folk Festival and the chaos of Dylan's move to electric music when he slowed down, went home to Woodstock, New York, and strapped himself to a tree with roots without the intention of going anywhere. I'm Vanessa, this is Raised by Hippies, and if you dig content about music in the 20th century, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to my channel, and drop me a comment with your thoughts on The Basement Tapes, Bob Dylan's most liberated album.
The spirit of the Dylan songs is being portrayed in his, with this incredibly corny group behind him. I like his earlier records as on his freewheeling LPs, etc., but this I just can't stick.
Folk music gone electric, great art on a jukebox. Mixing genres was still very rare at this point. Segmentation was the calling card of the industry. Afterwards, Dylan was determined to find the right set of musicians to accompany him on what he knew was going to be a controversial and difficult tour. These guys would have to be top tier when it came to their instruments, and they would have to have the kind of temperament to not mind getting bottles thrown at them mid-set, who could follow orders of defiance without question.
Last on the bill, not least, ladies and gentlemen, here he is, back from the grave. Right, straight from the grave. I don't believe you. You're a liar.
John Hammond Jr. was the son of John Hammond, the man who gave Bob Dylan his first contract with Columbia Records back in 1960. Jr. was a singer-songwriter too, and he'd been working with producer Tom Wilson on electrifying some of his own songs when Dylan was inspired to try it for himself for the first time on Like a Rolling Stone with session musicians. Jr. was the first one to introduce Dylan to the music of the Hawks. Dylan was blown away. The Hawks were offered a 1 in a million chance to change their lives and attach themselves forever to the most famous American songwriter. They started with the American leg of the tour, and it was somewhat of a shock to the band when at every show, when Dylan launched into the second half of the show, the electric half, which featured the Hawks as backup, the audience booed and hissed and threw things and were totally insane. Dylan later remarked that he considered all of those guys gallant knights just for standing beside him. In Levon Helm's book, he addresses this period. He says he didn't like the music, he didn't like the whole fame thing, and he didn't want to be in anybody's band, and he was really getting tired of getting booed every time he played a show. This just wasn't what he signed up for. And so, when Dylan asked the group to join him on the next leg of the tour in Europe, Levon backed out. Robbie was devastated. Levon was quickly replaced with another drummer that Dylan had his eye on, and the band got on a plane for Paris.
They just said, don't make a sound. I'll just say, boo.
He blew up and we're not going to look the first strike.
And then Albert will come and go, boo.
Right. Hey, I love the description in the paper last night. Another night of catcalls for Dylan.
Oh, I didn't see that.
Many of the audience walked out.
I saw one, man. Did you see one paper that said, everybody walked out?
I haven't seen that one.
Everybody walked out. I saw a paper, it said, everybody walked out. In Liverpool, I saw it. I'm gonna walk out.
Stand up.
There's a little bit of mystery around what happened the day that Bob Dylan crashed his motorcycle, coming around a mountain curve, followed by Albert and Sally Grossman, who did not actually see the crash, just the bike and Dylan laying by the side of the road. He apparently did not appear hurt at the time, and the bike sustained little damage. They filed no police report, nor did they go to the hospital initially. But Dylan claims he crashed, breaking several vertebrae in his neck, resulting in limited mobility and having to wear a neck brace for a couple of months as corroborated by members of the band. A lot of people think that maybe Dylan was just fed up with the rock star thing, hated being famous, and caused the accident himself to duck out of the public eye for as long as he deemed necessary, for the rest of the 60s, as it were. Whatever the reason was, the act of making music had been tainted for Bob up until this point. He was frustrated, his tastes were changing, and he was becoming more and more influenced by what the band were doing, just as much as they were influenced by him and his famously impeccable ability to write poet lyrics on top of simple melodies. There was snow on the ground. February in upstate New York is cold, gray, and in rural areas it can be isolating, especially in Ulster County, squished in between orange and green south of Albany. This was the place that Bob Dylan selected as his home base, not far from Manhattan if he needed to be there, but far enough that he could physically and mentally escape the turmoil of his life as a famous songwriter. Dylan, who spent his life in the Midwest, was drawn to the desolation and the remoteness. The basement of the house was what they were really interested in. Everybody told them they were crazy for wanting to record down there. Concrete walls and floors, glass windows. This was not set up for sound design in any way. But there was something about this space that just had the right vibe. So they laid down a few layered rugs and set up their space in the simplest way possible. Their old friend Bobby liked the space too. And as his mobility improved through his recovery from the accident, he also became interested in recording there. Recordings for what would become the basement tapes started with just Rick, Richard, Garth, and Robbie in Dylan's red room in his house nearby. Soon they would move the sessions to the Big Pink House. Dylan did an interview later with Rolling Stone magazine where he said that this was the only way to make a recording. In somebody's basement, windows open, peaceful, relaxed, with a sleeping dog on the floor.
How did the songs from the basement tapes come about? Well, I decided this kind of was going to stay up in Woodstock for a while. So my band from the touring we had done together, those guys all just came on up there and they liked it too. Robbie called me up one day and said, what's happening, what's happening? And I said, nothing. He said, well, he was in a mood for some nothing too. We would just kind of like sit around and come up with songs. And before we went down into the basement to put it on tape, Woodstock was a place where you could kind of go get your thoughts together. It was an artist colony. So I started writing a bunch of songs. I knew I wasn't going to write anything about myself. I didn't have nothing to say about myself. I figure anybody else would be interested in it anyway. Just any old thing would create a beginning to a song. Names out of phone books and things. When China first explored that hydrogen bomb, that just kind of flashed across the headlines in the newspapers. So, we just go in and write Tears of Rage. There was riots in the street. There were rioting in Rochester, New York, and that wasn't that far away. So we write Too Much of Nothing. So one thing led to another, the human heart. That's the first time anybody had ever heard of a human heart being transplanted. That was incredible. It was a real breakthrough. So we came up with a song. And then after we got the lyrics down, we took the songs into the basement.
The simplicity of this lifestyle was what Dylan needed at the time more than anything. And this recording session and these songs would be a reflection of that. For 7 to 8 months, Bob and Robbie went over to Big Pink 5 to 7 times a week to work on those songs. They were sometimes playing 14, 15 songs a day, with Dylan coming up with new ideas constantly. Sometimes he'd walk in, sit down at a typewriter, bang out a full page of lyrics, run downstairs to Richard or Rick, and say, hey, you got any music that fits this? During this time, they came up with hundreds of songs, many of them later to become classics. At first, the songs were only distributed to relevant artists within the Albert Grossman folk rock circle, and many of the songs were covered by those acts. Otherwise, Dylan shelved the album, and it wouldn't be released until a few years after that, in June 1975. Most of the songs had already been floating around as bootlegs at this point, but this was the first time that they'd been officially released. 16 of the songs had Dylan on vocals and the band backing him up, while the remaining 8 were demos created by the band on their own without Dylan. When the album was officially released, it was criticized for the inclusion of these tracks that didn't feature Dylan, and also for its exclusion of a few other key songs which were recorded during that time and were not included on the original Basement Tapes release, such as my all-time favorite Bob Dylan song, I'm Not There, which they claimed was too unfinished to be included on the record. Let me know what you think in the comments. Are you a fan of the Basement Tapes? What's your favorite Bob Dylan era? Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.